All right. Welcome to another episode of the Bad Occult podcast, the podcast where we do, or at least talk about, inadvisable things in the name of magical science. As always, I am Tyler Cadmian, aka Shadow, and with me as always,
Felix S. Warren. I'm that guy.
that guy. Just a little guy.
Just a little guy. When you channel into me, you are probably 1 foot shorter.
Yes, that has been a common, okay, I can't tell you how many times people have expected to be taller than me when they channel into you.
I seem to be about an inch shorter than you.
Yes, and it is very noticeable to some people, and they always make a comment about it. It's kind of hilarious.
Yeah, they're not used to holding their neck that way.
Mm-hmm.
Slightly up or even just straight. Sometimes just straight because obviously they talk to other tall people.
Right.
But they're used to holding it down, actually, I think.
Yeah. So, Mantis especially has mentioned it, I think, pretty much every single time that you've channeled him.
Oh gosh,
in
really?
one way or another. Yes. It's very funny.
Yeah. I guess they lose their tall people privilege when they channel into me.
Mm-hmm. You're just a little guy.
Now, that's it. There are a few ways that you can mitigate that. We found that, whenever someone's channeling into me who feels they need to be taller, I've got a pair of boots that add about 2 inches, maybe a little more, to my height, and then they feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
At that altitude.
Yeah, but then I can put my boots on, and then it's that problem all over again.
Well, it's not just interacting with you. A lot of it is moving around and getting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just generally, often when someone is walking, they'll feel like the leg isn't long enough.
Oh, yeah, we've had a few trip incidents.
Just little things like someone kind of stepping over to reach to something and expecting that their leg will, just reach a little longer.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I'd say it's the little difference that really does it, that really gets people, because they're not expecting that little difference.
Yes, it's really interesting. Especially since, lately I've been interacting with a lot of people, sitting down or laying down because of my injury. And so when I stand up, there's several people who, some newer people who don't realize that I am actually taller than you.
Yeah. Yeah, they kind of expect that we're both little guys. And it's well, yeah, we kind of are, but one of us is littler than the other.
Yep. So, I wanted to bring this up real quick. We've had a second, Battle of the Hooch.
Oh yeah, Battle of the Hooch, and we're gonna have a third.
We are.
So I don't know how much we're gonna really explain about this one. You brought this up to me by surprise.
Well, I just wanted to mention that they had, Rob and Mantis had done it again.
Yeah.
And that, Mantis, his fermented a bit. His had more, carbonation.
So Rob did something really big mystically after they started the ferment.
Yeah.
Actually, it was after they got poured into jars. So when you pour them in the jars and then put it in the fridge, they continue to ferment.
Right.
And they also carbonate. And right after that, Rob took a mystical journey. And because of that, his ferment stopped. If you're not around to tend to your ferment, there's a magical and psychic component that isn't being done.
Right.
And so it just dead ass stopped fermenting. It tastes fine. It can be used as cooking wine right now.
Mm-hmm.
It can also be used for a number of other things. It's fine. It's just that it doesn't, Mantis's is properly carbonated.
His is the more drinking one. The, Rob's has sort of turned into a mix between, like you said, a cooking wine and I feel like a cooking vinegar.
Yeah, at this point, and at this time, like, they've been in there for 2 weeks, so they're
Yeah.
both going to start getting vinegary.
Yeah.
But mantises would still be like a carbonated delight.
More like a kombucha, I think.
I've
Or
had
drinking
kombucha,
vinegar.
and I don't like kombucha, so I won't compare it to it. But there are similarities.
Yeah.
This is starting a culture and keeping up that
Yeah.
bacteria culture, and then getting the benefits of the culture. So yeah, they taste really well mixed together, and also Rob. If you drink his over the course of like a couple of minutes, take some sips over the course of a couple of minutes, it grows on you. Like,
yeah.
he has his is time traveling.
So yeah, I just wanted to provide that little update because like I don't know when they'd be available to like talk, both of them.
Yeah, and I think the earliest that they could start another ferment in this house would be in December, and we don't really know what's going to be happening then. I don't know if there will be enough rose hips around to specifically test with rose hips, but if they test with the same fruit,
Yeah.
I feel like I still want them to do a ferment where they're both using the same ingredients, and they're both doing this, like, one of them is not doing something mystically that the other isn't.
Right.
Like, basically, we keep control on all of the variables except for whether it's Mantis or Rob.
Right. But it's been very interesting to see that difference, especially because of that mystical journey that Rob took. Mantis ended up tending to both kind of. And just that one difference, how much of a difference it's made.
Yeah. And I would have never thought to test for this. They just happened to do this right before a thing, and the thing ended up affecting the ferment. We were never expecting this to happen. We were just trying to figure out a difference between Rob and Mantis's, like, psychic abilities or magical touch when it came to this particular chemistry thing.
Right. And I mean, I feel like that sort of ties into what we're going to be talking about, like how even though they are channeling into you, their presence does affect things.
Yeah, like when they come in, they can use my body's natural abilities. Like, my brain has some natural psychic abilities that they usually have at their disposal, but what abilities they use depend on what abilities they have and they're used to using. And some of their just, like, inherent nature, as it were.
Right.
So, like, Mantis's presence was here enough to keep his ferment going, but Rob did something to where that presence was no longer here to do that.
Right.
And yeah, like, the ferment is supposed to be something that affects you spiritually, a process that you go through. I think that I want to say something ominous, like, wherever he is. I think where Rob's gone, he is still going through a fermentation process, but that would affect things near him.
Right.
Not the alcohol that he left far behind.
Right.
Abandoned.
Far behind. Abandoned his poor child.
It turned into fucking ramen. Like, I used some of Rob's ferment as a base. Like, there's a part where you're supposed to put, like, white wine in the ramen. I used that instead.
And it turned out fucking amazing.
Yeah. So, even with him gone and not able to properly do the thing, it's still good.
Yes.
It's just that Mantis is apparently the best fucking fermenter in the world.
Yeah, everyone is always, like, so shocked at, like, how much flavor complexity comes out of Mantises. So,
Yeah.
yeah. I just wanted to provide an update on that.
It's a good time for it. I wasn't sure when we were to get to that, and I would hate to forget it, because it's a really interesting experiment, and there will definitely be a follow-up episode once they finally do the one where they could do the test.
When they could do the actual thing.
And if we find out another weird psychic or magical thing, instead, then fine. We're learning so much every time they do this stuff.
Yes, we are. So, anything else? I'm trying to think. I think, like, most of our episodes have been kind of self-contained. So I just wanted to provide that little update for anyone who was wondering.
Yeah, I think it's fun. I mean, we'll talk about any kind of like shopkeeping stuff towards the end of the episode.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about today's topic that today's guest is going to talk about.
Yes.
So I'm not gonna blow the name or the pronouns.
You already blew the pronouns.
Did I?
Yes.
Oh, that's right, I did. I was.
We try to keep new guests a surprise, but we always end up messing up in one way or the other. It's so funny.
So yeah, in the announcement I did, but if people haven't seen that, they don't know.
Ooh. Don't check Tumblr.
Don't check Tumblr. You get spoilers for this live episode 10 minutes from now. I don't know. So, our guest has been a presence in my life since at least since childhood, since Beetlejuice came out. So, and I've had them in my life, kind of doing things, and I wasn't always aware, and I'm not sure if they were always aware.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it was art.
Yes.
And so now that we've been doing so much work figuring out who's channeling into me at any given time,
mm-hmm.
and who I am actually present as.
Right.
It was actually Mantis who first was like, "Hey, while I'm in Felix, can I draw?
Mm-hmm.
Can I do the art? I don't usually do, but could I?"
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of started the new experiment with art, which is seeing if somebody is channeling into me and they feel like it, if they do art, what is it like?
Yeah. What
is their art style, and what does it look like compared to my art?
Yeah.
And several of them have been in here before and have done art before, and so I'll look at their art. I looked at today's guest's art, and I was like, oh, I know what art you did in me. You've been producing work for quite a long time. Mm-hmm. No wonder sometimes I can't finish that until a while, and I don't know why.
Yes.
There's art that this guest has done, and I've looked at it and man, this is a great piece that I'm doing, but I just don't feel like I could finish it right now. It'll set aside for several weeks, sometimes even months, and maybe even years.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I would just feel like doing it, and I would do it. But I wouldn't be me at that time, apparently. Mm-hmm. And that's when they had basically showed back up in me and decided to finish the thing.
And it causes an interesting thing where, when, earlier on in my and your relationship, there were times where I'd ask you about your art process, and you couldn't really answer. And this sort of, when you're doing this kind of stuff naturally, finding out this kind of stuff actually answers questions that you didn't know you had.
Yeah, because my process is really difficult, because back then I didn't know how many artists I was.
Yeah.
And so it's there just wasn't any one process.
And you were sometimes I'd sit down at my desk, and then next thing I know, I blinked, 4 hours have passed, and there's a completed artwork, in front of me.
Yeah.
And so it was you, Felix, weren't doing the art, but you were allowing someone else to do the art through you, though you didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah, and some of that, there's been times where I've been under, the influence of weird substances I wasn't aware of, in the methane house. And so then I would be producing all kinds of stuff and not really knowing why, and it would just kind of appear in front of me. And, I would have some awareness of it, mm-hmm. but not an understanding of why I made those choices and where I learned to do that.
Yeah.
And,
I found out today, in talking with our guest beforehand, that this is a person that really likes the whiteout. We were trying to figure out why we were getting so much whiteout at some point.
It's not just them.
Right.
There's a couple other people, but this guest in particular had a habit throughout my life of doing some stuff in pen and then doing whiteout on it to clean up the lines,
Yes.
and then doing more pen on it and then doing more whiteout on it. And so they were using like a ton of it.
Yes. This was the reason why at one point I just like cleared out Fred Meyer when they had it on sale for $1.
I wish whiteout lasted longer because I found some of those a couple years later, and they all dried out.
Yeah.
They dry out after a bit.
Yeah.
It doesn't keep.
Well, at that point, like, there was so much whiteout being used that I was just like, fuck it, I'm gonna buy like 20 of them.
Yeah.
They're $1 each if they die a sad death in a drawer somewhere.
They did. A sad death.
Sad death.
So yeah, I'd say, let me think about anything else I can say about this guest and my experience with them. They've been a very positive influence.
Mm-hmm.
Really with the art, and also interacting with people online, fandoms and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm actually more social than I would otherwise be because this guest has been with me for so much of my life.
Yeah.
I've kind of learned how to do internet comments almost. Ways to put up supportive comments, ways to just chat almost.
Yeah.
And I had a very socially stunted upbringing, so I really needed someone to kind of show me those ropes.
Yeah.
And I really just appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a really great point to make, is that because these people come in and do stuff through us, and they also bring their own experiences, sometimes we can learn things just from somebody being doing things that we don't normally do in the body, because the body gets some muscle memory, things like that make it a lot easier to do those things ourselves in the future.
Yeah, with myself especially, sometimes I have trouble imagining myself doing something I haven't done before.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say the task is boiling water. Mm-hmm. Even though I know that water can boil at a certain temperature as a scientific fact, the first time that I boiled water, I had my doubts.
Really?
Yeah, there's some kind of I don't really know quite what to call it, because I haven't really seen this talked about in the Tumblr mental health communities.
Mm-hmm.
But just someone telling you, okay, you follow the recipe and you get this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And even just the most basic steps of it, having doubt on whether that will actually happen.
Right.
Or for some reason, I am the one exception.
You are the one exception to physics.
But what if it goes wrong? What if there's some kind of thing? And so having someone just do even simple things while they channel into me is really helpful for me, because then there's a demonstration for me. Look, it works.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely will work.
Yeah. No, that's been very interesting to see. Especially we mentioned it before, you've got a physical disability with a head injury, and having people come in who are used to having complete brains and do things that do involve needing a complete brain helps you be able to do things that sometimes you haven't been able to do in the past.
Yeah. It's kind of hit and miss. Sometimes mm-hmm. they're using the parts of their brain that they have from afar
right.
to do that with, and so I don't quite get the benefit. But sometimes they decide to use my brain to do it,
Your
and
brain
so
meat.
my brain, and so if they use my brain to do it, then my brain learns to do that and can do
Right.
it some more.
Awesome. So, I don't know how much more you want to talk, or if you want to get ready to bring our guest in.
I do want to talk a bit about the topic.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is about being channeled.
Mm-hmm.
I'm introducing a few things from the standpoint of the channeler, and sharing a couple of notes that I've observed, because often whenever I've channeled, I'm still partially there, or I get enough of a body memory afterward that I can give commentary on it. But basically, if you project somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and you are aware of being channeled into someone else, then this guest has a lot of tips for you that you should really listen to.
Yes. So,
I'm gonna hand it over
all right.
to our guest.
Felix is going to do that while I get the visuals set up. That's there. We got our blank mirror up now. Really glad that we were able to get that kind of stuff set up. So, yeah. And it looks like he's, yep, there. There we go. Our guest is just getting settled in. And then soon we'll talk about the topic. They actually brought this to us, like suggested this. So I'm very excited.
Hi.
Hello, hello, hello. Your wonderful picture is up. We've moved rooms. The audio is going to be a little bit different. Hopefully it's better, but you don't get to see the visual of what Felix has done.
I have a bit of visual memory, and also I talked to him while he was doing this one.
Oh, awesome, awesome. So, I got a few questions for any of our new guests. What is your names or nickname that you'd like to be called?
I go by Umbra right now.
Umbra, okay. And gender identity?
She, hers, but I'm very flexible.
Okay. So
I'd also like to mention that by Earth terminology, I'm trans.
Oh.
And I would like anybody out there who is trans to know that, because I think that would be helpful for them.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, welcome. She, her. And then where are you calling in from?
I am on a spaceship. You hear this a lot.
Spaceship!
I am part of the crew of the ship that Mantis and Rob are on.
Mm-hmm. I think long-time listeners are starting to see a theme. Yeah, if someone says they're from the ship, it's probably the same group. We will make a distinction if it's from a different ship, but we want to introduce the people that we've sort of connected with the longest, and they all happen to be on the same spaceship.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like, if one of us goes on a podcast over here and talks to the rest of us on the ship, the rest of us want to be on it.
Right.
So it's like, that's why you've got so many people kind of showing up here. We all heard about it from each other. We live around each other.
Mm-hmm. And then, what do you do?
So I am a bit of an engineer, mechanical engineer. I largely design and develop mechanical body parts, but also I can pilot a spaceship if needed. I can fix pretty much anything. I'm a little bit more into internals. I do a lot of work with Mantis, like a lot of collaboration right now, and he's a bit better with the programming and I'd say circuit boards that integrate chips.
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of housing, and I love fucking robots. Like, I just really love building robots.
Okay, I'm glad you said that.
I meant that as an adjective, not a verb.
You love robots.
I love robots. So yeah, it would be my dream to build an Ava unit or something.
Oh, wow. Cool. So, yeah, it's really interesting to talk to you guys and find out, like, differences that you have. And then you actually brought this as a topic, and wanted to talk to anyone who does the channeling from the channelee.
Yeah, like a few years back, I remember there was a big hoo-ha about reality flipping, is what they were calling it.
Mm-hmm.
And channeling is basically what that is. It's just that channeling doesn't really imply what reality you went into or anything. But if you're in the practice of trying to gain awareness of yourself in someone else's body or living someone else's experience, I would put that under channeling or astral projection,
Mm-hmm.
if you care to call it that. Classically, it has been. And there's a lot on how to channel a spirit and how to project yourself, but I've not noticed a whole lot on how to be in someone else.
Yeah.
Like what to do when you've been channeled and what not to do.
Yeah.
Things that happen, things that don't happen.
Right. And I mean, I think this is a really great time to do it because, like, we've had, let's see, you are guest number 5. Yeah, 5 now.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
This place is popular.
Oh, shoot. Sorry, I have a bit of a cold. I've been trying to make sure I don't cough too much, but sometimes it's going to happen today.
I made a funny.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and, like, Felix and I have talked so many times about our experiences as channelers and as observers of someone who is being channeled into someone else, but, like, not so much as, I think Rob and I did a little bit, I think it was episode 2 or 3 where we got into it a little bit, but I think this is something where a whole episode just dedicated to this is a good idea.
Yeah, like a lot of what you've been talking about up until now has been like how to set yourself up as a channeler so a spirit will be more comfortable.
Right.
But what if you're channeling into someone who doesn't know how to do all that or isn't even aware that they're channeling someone, which can happen. Like let's say you just fall asleep and in a dream you end up in someone else.
Right.
And they don't know that you're there. That's one of the most common ways that channeling and projection happens, is that you just ended up in a dream maybe after you got really high or something.
Yeah.
And
Ate
so
too much cheese.
yeah, ate too much cheese. that dream cheese will put you in a weird place.
Mm-hmm.
So like when you're in that body, what do you do? What can you do? Would be a good idea. And it depends. For one, it depends on what body you ended up in. I think the best thing is to be aware of the fact that you are in a new body that is not the one that you started with in this life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, especially if you're going from the dreamer mindset, a lot of time people have dreams in environments or places that seem superficially similar to what you're used to, but that's usually just like your brain trying to interpret totally foreign visuals or concepts. Like you see someone who you think is it looks like your grandmother in the dream, but it might just be like an older woman that fulfills that role for the person that you accidentally channeled into while dreaming.
Yeah, especially if you're not really used to the concept of being in someone else during a dream, your brain and subconscious will try to make it easier on you by adding in that set dressing.
And I will say, even as someone who is used to like dreaming and I have channeled into other people during dreams, I still have just like my school experience, my college dorm room, my boyfriend at the time, is the people that I'm familiar with during that time period. If it's like a college, like I'm dreaming into a college student, for example, even though I've been doing this for years, I still just see that. So it's not a method of like knowing that you're doing it. It's sometimes your subconscious is just like, this is the easiest shortcut. I'm never going to do anything differently.
Sometimes your subconscious only has 1 or 2 sets of Barbie dolls.
Yeah.
And it's going to play all kinds of different games with that one set of dolls. And so, like, if you were a kid playing with those dolls, or you were a kid looking at another kid playing with those dolls, you'd be able to pick up on the game pretty fast.
Right.
But like sometimes, if people are dreaming, a lot of times their question is like, why am I having this dream? And so
Right.
you want to make it about yourself somehow to give that understanding. But sometimes it's not that it's not about you, it's that
Yeah.
you were in someone else, and so a lot of that experience was about being in someone else.
Right. Right. So yeah, that's definitely a good thing to bring up. Is that like it? I personally believe that dreams could become incomprehensible to the dreamer if the subconscious doesn't supply some kind of like copy and paste that the dreamer is familiar with.
Yeah, the subconscious is doing a lot of translating for you, and the subconscious, it speaks in symbols and silhouettes, and a silhouette is not very detailed. You can mistake one silhouette, it's like the bathroom signs.
Yeah.
That one silhouette is standing in for so many different people.
Mm-hmm.
And no one actually looks like Triangle Woman. Um,
I actually saw someone on Facebook point this out because they only have one leg, and like the regular one is that they have two-legged guy for male, and then one-legged, the women with the legs together. It just looks like one leg, and he's like, "Which one do I go into?"
oh! Which do you care more about, my gender or my leg?
So yeah, that's definitely been some interesting jokes that have come up, but it's something to consider.
Yeah. So, like, my experience of this right now, I've got a pretty detailed impression of what my surroundings are and what you're like, and like what the whole house is like, because I've been here so much that I've bumped into the walls enough times that I now know where the walls are.
So one thing that I have to ask, since you've been in Felix several times, are you in your own body taller or shorter than him?
Oh, I'm definitely taller.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on what I'm doing, how much taller I am, because I and most other people who I know in space have some gear that can adjust their height, like basically.
Oh, limb enhancers, yeah.
So I'm not. I guess you would call it that. Specifically, when it comes to the height, it's like if you had platform shoes where the platforms could get taller or shorter.
Oh, fun.
And then when it comes to limb lengtheners for the arms, just imagine that you could have an extendable grabby claw.
Right.
And actually, there is a little grabby claw thing, like a stick in the house that you can pull the thing and it pinches the little crab claw. It gives you about 3 more feet of reach, I think.
Effectively 2 to 2.5.
Yeah, something like that. People who have been channeling into Felix have been fondly looking upon this appliance as the limb enhancer replacement.
The primitive version.
I can get stuff on a high shelf again. Yay! It's so efficient.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, we've talked about people who realize that they are dreaming into other people, but what about your experience is different when you're channeling into Felix and with other people on the ship, at least, because they are still conscious of what their body is doing. They're not asleep. They're not putting themselves into like a sleep-like state.
Yeah, like some of us do it different. You typically do put yourself into a deep state of relaxation.
Right.
Or you can multi-process. Sometimes we can walk around and also walk around down here. Now that runs into some constraints. The thing is, if I were doing a task up on the ship and also doing some stuff down here, I would be splitting my attention. And Like, it would be difficult to converse deeply.
Also, you're in space, and that could be potentially dangerous, considering the fact that you work with equipment and electronics. And I'm assuming if you're working with metal, you might be working with something like a blowtorch or laser cutter or something that you just need to have your full attention on.
Yeah, there's only certain tasks I can really get done on either end. Some of us are more adapted to multitasking. I'm more of a single tasker. But the thing is, like, there's been many times that I have, like, projected or channeled into Felix and not really been aware of it. So let's say that I'm doing something on my computer and Felix is doing something on his computer that are superficially similar. There's been a few times where we've simply been superficially similar enough that the experiences could overlap.
Gotcha.
And so otherwise, you can get the effect of, like, I'm walking around down here interacting with things, and then up on the ship you could see me walking around doing nothing. It looks like sleepwalking. In fact, early projectors, that's a thing that often happens, is that they're sleepwalking instead of their body staying still, and you can kind of learn to not do that. Most people lay down. Rob does a thing where he sits down and reads a book.
Yes.
Often we'll sit at a computer terminal or something.
And then Jules is his own thing that we don't really understand.
Yeah, Jules can talk about how he does his particular thing at some point, but there is, like, to some extent, he is doing something very similar to us. He's just managed to, like, he can really multitask.
Yeah.
He would be the multitasking expert.
Yes.
So, I'd say that, like, if you're consciously trying to project into someone, then you're going to start having to prepare on your end of projecting, but also when you get the experience of channeling into someone, when you actually gain consciousness of being in that other person's body, there's going to be some stuff that you do want to do and don't want to do. And some of it really varies depending upon, like, bodies and everything. I'd say, let's talk about food.
Yeah.
So can you eat whenever you're channeled into someone else, whenever you're channeling into another person's body? And what will happen to that person's body that you're channeling into? What will happen into your body that you're projecting from?
Right.
So channeling body, projecting body.
Right.
Makes sense? So in the channeling body, if you eat something, there's been a few cases documented where someone has been able to eat something that the channeling body is technically allergic to.
Yes.
And the channeling body not get the allergy or not get the allergic reaction. And that's because the chemistry of that allergen has, or of what would be an allergen to the channeled body, that chemistry has gone to the projecting body.
Right.
Where they are not allergic.
Yes.
Now, I don't think that's something that you can really depend on.
No, that is definitely a case-by-case basis. I've had a few times. I have a minor allergy to pineapple. And so there's been a few times where someone has channeled into me that isn't aware of it. A lot of times I've noticed it depends on awareness and like connection with the body. If it's someone that's like been very familiar with me, and they sort of like go based off of the body processes instead of their own assumptions of how the body would work, the allergy is in effect. But there have been a few times where it's been like a first time person, no idea that I'm allergic to pineapple, and has something with pineapple in it, and I don't have the allergic reaction.
Yeah, and like it can be really hit or miss. I've heard of a lot of religious experiences, or like say pagan rituals where they have gods come down, or they channel angels or whatever.
Yes.
And the god or angel will be like, "Yes, I can eat the bread. It will work this time."
Yes.
And I feel like they're expending a lot of psychic power,
right,
to be able to make that occur.
Right.
You're basically doing a chemistry hijack.
Yeah.
Now, if you're casually just walking around in someone doing the coffee shop AU version of channeling, where you're just casual, you're not going to be able to expend enough energy necessarily to do that. And so it would be simpler just to not.
Right.
Like usually the ritual thing is because like they have ritual bread there or something.
Yes.
Or it's considered that whenever you summon this spirit for a religious thing, that they are always given this as an offering, no matter what. And so that is usually the cause to override the caution.
Right. But if you're doing it casually, like Felix and I and everyone who's channeled, been on this great experiment with us, we do tend to follow the body processes. What about like feeling pain?
Oh, that's interesting. So it depends on like my abilities. If I were to mitigate feeling pain, I personally, in my projecting body, do have the ability to dissociate somewhat. And so I might be able to apply that ability over here. Now, a projecting spirit who is a specialist in blocking out pain would be able to do a lot more, and in some rituals, in some religions, it's actually proof that you're channeling that particular entity, that they can do something that normally people would not be able to do.
Right. Like endure, say, walking on hot coals or extreme cold, or I'm not going to mention some of the more graphic stuff that's coming to mind. But
we don't
like...
have to. Yeah. A common one is fire eating.
Oh yeah.
And also performing certain feats with alcohol, showing a very, very high alcohol tolerance that usually that body wouldn't have. Now, that's not something that, if you're a casual projector just trying to learn these things, if you don't have in your body the ability to do these things, then you shouldn't try it out in another body.
Yeah, that goes into sort of the etiquette kind of thing. Don't try something in someone else's body that you're not able to do in your own.
Like, there's a few things where it's like, oh, okay, Felix can draw. Well, let me see what I can draw for, various spirits. That's an ability that if you try out and it fails, all you have is just like,
a scribble.
A shitty drawing. That doesn't really hurt anyone.
And, yeah. But if you're trying something like, a kick flip off of a ramp on a skateboard or something, and you're able to do that in your body, but the body that you're channeling into has never been on a skateboard before, that is not a good thing to do.
Actually, I can give you some experience from this body, although it wouldn't have been mine. I believe that at some times it may have been Mantis's. Now, Felix shouldn't drive.
No.
He does have the ability to drive.
Yes.
He has a driver's license, and he knows how to drive. But there's some things going on with his brain and also with some PTSD involving driving and being in a car that mean that he should not be at the wheel. Now, before he learned that, he drove plenty of times, and he had very, very bad anxiety while driving, except when he didn't. And when he didn't have that anxiety,
it was definitely someone else who was driving.
Yeah.
Sorry, we have
There's a blinky light. I turned it off. So when he didn't... So suddenly, he didn't have that anxiety. And so, say Mantis was driving the car instead. And then his drive style would change. And his ability to deal with, the fear of other vehicles on the road would change. But also, at the time, Felix would experience kind of a distant feeling. Like, maybe not being all the way there. And sometimes he would pop out of it and suddenly be behind the wheel, fully aware of being behind the wheel. I would say that it was almost like a kind of dissociation. And so once Felix and us on the ship, including Mantis, learned that that's what was actually going on, then everyone decided, no, we shouldn't help Felix drive.
Yes. I do the driving in the house exclusively because I do not have those issues.
it's like it's not an ability that you can depend on always happening, and so when it comes to like someone being behind the wheel, that's a life or death situation.
And I mean, like the fact is, it's avoiding an anxiety, and sometimes the physical body's anxiety will overwhelm the person who is projecting into there, and then suddenly the person who quote unquote owns the body will be back in that situation. Like,
Yeah, especially when there comes to like PTSD or triggering events, the body will automatically react, the brain will automatically react, and then whoever is channeling into that body will suddenly get the full experience of that brain being like no,
right.
and that will probably be an experience that they're not used to having in their own brain. And so yeah, then you just snap right out, and then whoever shouldn't be at the wheel is suddenly at the wheel.
Right.
So, like, when it comes to, like, what should you do when channeling into someone? Driving, I'm not going to say you shouldn't, but, like, you can pause and start to kind of, like, think through the memories of the brain that you're currently occupying and be like, does this person normally drive?
Mm-hmm.
Where do they normally drive and how often? What's their area like in terms of speed limits and laws? What is their vehicle like? Does their vehicle actually have enough gas?
Mm-hmm.
Is their vehicle an electric vehicle and that doesn't apply? There's all kinds of like I've just listed some of the basic factors just behind driving, and I think once you consider those, it's like okay, unless you're very confident, then I'd say stay off the road.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like that with a lot of like kind of dangerous things. Like Umbra, you've mentioned that you work with mechanical stuff, but that body is not familiar with anything having to do with like say putting together an electric circuit or like wiring a light. Anything that could be potentially dangerous, don't recommend doing in a body that you're borrowing.
Yeah, and there's certain ways that your abilities and affinities can still register and be used without you having to completely use them. For instance, with the art, one thing that I noticed, like I did art consciously in Felix's body for the first time yesterday and today.
Yes.
And what I learned while doing it was that my technical illustrating abilities do map over to some extent. I am used to using completely different art tools where I am, like using tablets and stuff, and right now Felix is using a lot of pen and paper and alcohol markers and such. And so I found that sometimes it was difficult to apply the drawing techniques that I'm used to with the tools that I'm using down here.
Mm-hmm.
But I was still showing a lot of knowledge of like mechanics.
Yeah.
And a high degree of precision whenever I was rendering. One of the piece that I did, like I'll just blow this one. If you find Felix's Tumblr, it's on it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't give a shit if it's art that's posted. He's basically now a group artist. So it's got a character who's holding the moon and sitting on the earth. And while I was drawing the earth, and I like used a photo or two as reference to be able to get everything right, but I found that I didn't need them very much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in space, I'm used to looking at planets, and I knew how to do space art.
Right.
Like very detailed. Like I've had to do this before where I am, and it was really really interesting. I actually had to stop.
Mm-hmm.
I like a high level of detail in what it is that I render, and I had to remind myself that I only wanted to spend so long on the planets because it was supposed to be a character drawing.
Right.
And I found myself really thinking about what it is that I do where it is that I'm from and the experiences that I've had where I'm from, like the kind of art that I do there. Also just found myself like thinking, wow, it's so cool to be able to use paper and a pencil. And I know that sounds really boring for most listeners, but on a spaceship, you don't have an infinite supply of unrenewable resources. So a lot of using a tablet to do stuff, a lot of digital illustration. You don't have a big pile of typing paper.
Yeah, because paper is like one-time use. Basically, once you've drawn or written on it, it's kind of hard to reuse it unless you cut it up into something else. And also, I mean, you were talking with me the other day about, the novelty of using a pencil.
Yeah, so graphite is dangerous, not just because it's somewhat, it can easily cause sparks and is somewhat flammable in certain air environments, but it makes so much dust.
Right.
The eraser scrubbings as well make so much dust. And dust is a real big problem in space environments.
Yes. Especially in, like, any sort of, like, sub-Earth gravity situations, you may not be able to float, but the dust from your pencil drawing might be able to float and then get into something important. And graphite, as you mentioned, is slightly conductive, so it does spark. And if that thing that it floats into happens to be electronic, whoopsie.
Yeah, it's a real problem. There's only certain instruments that you're allowed to use in space, and also most of the instruments that you have like several different uses.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's really convenient down here because, like, oh, I can use a pencil. That's so nice. But sometimes I'm like, I put together IKEA furniture.
Yes.
The other day, and it was such a big pain. I thought it was going to be so easy. Like let's just say I've seen some IKEA commercials, and I've seen reference to people putting together IKEA furniture. I'm like, that sounds like so much fun. Furniture you can put together yourself. That sounds like the kind of thing that I do. And it's like there's a special twisty little thing for every single hole. I have to get out 3 more tools than I think I should have to get out.
Right.
I'm used to multi-tool stuff that adjusts itself. I don't have to go search around for the little pile of bits to put into the fucky little screwdriver.
Yes, this was a whole ordeal.
It's heavy. It's heavy. Things that are not in space are very heavy.
Yes.
And so just like so many little things got in the way, that by the time I was done putting together that little IKEA thing, I was so exasperated, tired.
It was like wasn't really properly able to celebrate. I think you switched back to Felix soon after because you were just so like, I'm done. I will appreciate it later, but for now, I'm done.
I was exhausted. Like, I had plans for what to do with that furniture. And, like,
just
later,
got left in the middle of the living room for, like, 45 minutes.
Yeah, I didn't even put it against the wall.
No.
I was so done.
If it didn't need the top of it to be put on last, I don't think you would have even put it upright.
There's a step where you put the top of it on and then afterwards you put these little things on that lock it in, and I'm like, who the fuck cares? Just put it on and gravity will hold it down. Fuck you. But I put the little fiddly things in anyway.
Yes.
I understand that if you try to pick it up by that, then the rest of it will drop down. It's very inconvenient. But damn, did I not want to do that. One of the consistent things is that things down here take way longer than I expect them to. I estimate that it'll take a certain amount of time. Or, like in the kitchen, I expect that things will take much shorter than they do. So I'm not used to cooking the old-fashioned way.
Right.
More astronaut food type stuff. And so, like, it sounds really romantic. Like, just boiling some eggs. And then you have some boiled eggs. You can make deviled eggs. And
you don't realize that it takes about an hour
there's like a whole process where you boil eggs. You don't just there's like
you
a
don't
timing.
Just drop it in and tell the machine boil eggs to hard boil.
Yeah, it doesn't handle itself. You got to keep on
No.
coming. There's like a stove, and it just has a metal coil on it. You charge up with electricity, and that heats up. And that sounds like the most crude caveman thing in the world.
To you?
um, like, just if you were to like have that where I am, like, I know that people do this in proper environments. It's just going from one to the other. It's a heck of a thing.
Yeah.
So, like, let's say cooking. Um, different people have channeled into Felix and cooked. You have seen Felix's cooking ability improve as this has happened.
I have. I've also seen people who come in after someone who has good cooking ability and then get very upset that they followed the exact same pattern as, like, bacon. We've been
Yep.
cooking bacon in the oven, and we've had people who, like, just have it down, and then we have someone who comes in who doesn't normally cook, and then they try to follow the exact same instructions, and it's like, why are some of these really crispy and why are some of these really floppy? Like, what? I did the exact same thing as so and so did. I don't get it.
So cooking is an interesting thing because we found that it's similar to you were earlier talking about the ferment with Rob.
Right.
Well, Rob's a real good cook.
Yes.
He's a real natural in the kitchen, and I think he's drawing on some experience of his own. So this body didn't know how to cook bacon.
Right.
And he basically taught the body how to cook bacon. But also, you can go through the physical process of cooking bacon, and another person can go through that exact same physical process and get different results.
Yes.
And there's just a psychic component there. There is some sort of thing going on where the person who is just like the more accomplished chef, the more natural chef, will sort of be able to use those psychic abilities to compensate for something. Like, let's say that the reason the bacon didn't go as well is because it was a different temperature or different weather that day.
Right.
Maybe Rob just sort of naturally adjusts the time to compensate for that and doesn't even think about it.
I mean, it's as simple as knowing that partway through baking, you may need to turn the like pan or sheet or whatever that you're using. Like, I know that the oven that we have, especially if you're using the upper racks, you will need to turn the whole thing around partway through baking to make sure everything goes evenly. Mm-hmm. And not everyone knows that, like, one little trick. It's like that's one little secret that bakers hate.
Yeah, and if it's that one little thing that you do, it may not even register in the body's memory.
Right.
It might not get logged, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And so just little tricks like that make a big difference.
Yeah.
And, like, I mean, whenever Rob started cooking bacon in this body, he had trouble, like, the first time, I think.
Right.
And so, like, the person who came in and then tried to cook it with the same method, them having a little trouble that first time, like, that's the learning experience.
Right. And it's, like, very interesting to see different channeled people go through similar experiences and learn things, and then in many cases take it back to where they are, like you up in space, or Ben, who was on our last podcast in Mageville, like taking experiences from here and back to where they are and applying it there.
Yeah. Like, if you're very aware of channeling into a body, then that awareness means that you get to take that back to where you are.
Mm-hmm.
The more that you're conscious of it, the more you'll take what you learn back consciously and apply it. But even if you learn it subconsciously, I think that somebody who, like, dreamed into a body and then maybe forgot the dream would still keep some knowledge and skill from that.
Definitely. Now, one thing that I've wanted to ask is basically, I know you, Umbra, have channeled subconsciously and now more consciously into Felix. How much has the experience on your end changed from when, like Felix mentioned, like he figured out that you were doing some art of his from years ago versus like consciously doing your own art now?
So, some of my actual life changed in
Mm-hmm.
between those points. Like I've had different things happen to me over the course of the years. Like for instance, before I wasn't on the ship that I'm on now.
Mm-hmm.
I was on I was orbiting somewhere. I don't want to get into too many
No,
details.
it's fine.
um, and so I was a lot less aware back then of the fact that I was channeling into a specific person on a specific planet in a specific circumstance,
Right.
and more just thinking, oh, this Sailor Moon thing is cool. So yeah, I did a lot of Sailor Moon fan art at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really take a lot of that back with me.
Mm-hmm.
It was more like just having a cool dream and
Right.
having a break from the experience of reality that I was having. Now I'm so conscious of what's happening that I've already been making some plans to do some more art in space using the tools that I have up there.
That's so cool.
Because it's just not something that we really think about doing is art for a hobby. There's most of us have been doing a job up in
Mm-hmm.
space for quite a while. Up in space, anywhere that we're from. We're
Right.
usually doing our jobs, doing our day to day lives. And so suddenly being aware, it's like, oh, I could be doing art. I could be doing music. That could be a hobby or a craft or whatever that I engage with.
Yeah.
Um, like it's like anytime that somebody just kind of decides to just pick up a musical instrument out of nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
um, there's always that first time where you're exploring it. But I already know that I've done some of it down here. I already know what I enjoy doing down here. So I can do that where I'm from as well. And I don't know. It's just a lot of people don't think about doing art.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I didn't really think about doing because it's not it doesn't produce something that will immediately make you able to live.
Right.
And it doesn't produce something that I've been trained to do or have been doing for hire.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just wouldn't really come to my mind that's a thing that I could do and it would and I would enjoy it and it might produce results in addition to that were important. So just coming down here and boiling eggs, making just the smallest type of food. After Rob made the bacon, he started getting an idea that he was pretty good in the kitchen, so he started taking on some of the cooking responsibilities
Mm-hmm.
on the ship. And then we all started realizing, wait, we could be making our food better up here. We could be taking some of these things that we have in the cargo hold and using them as ingredients.
Hey.
Down here, I look in the pantry and it's okay, what's in the pantry that I could use to make a meal?
Right.
And sometimes I have to really stretch my brain to do it, but it's fun. And so when I go back up there, it's oh, we have a lot more options than we thought about. We're just
Yeah.
not using all the things that we have.
Right. So yeah, that's definitely very interesting in that the experience that you have down here can help you expand your mind into opportunities that you have to utilize things or do things that you wouldn't normally think about. And I think that is the biggest benefit of channeling into someone with a different life experience than yours, in that you just get to walk in their shoes, to experience life from their point of view, and being able to be aware of that and taking that back with you. I guess, do you have any tips for people who are channeling or realizing, maybe during this podcast, they're realizing that, hey, some of the daydream stuff that they have might not be so much of a daydream? And how do they bring those experiences that they're having back with them in a more concrete way?
Well, there's a couple of things. If you want to bring it back in a more concrete way, um, the more thinking that you do in the brain that you occupy,
Mm-hmm.
the in the channeling brain, the more figuring out things for yourself that you do in there, the more you're likely to bring it back to where you're projecting from. It's like you're making concrete decisions and doing like concrete
Mm-hmm.
thinking operations. Um, Whereas just being told something or just watching something
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily come over the same way. It's like watching a movie about kayaking versus actually kayaking.
Mm-hmm.
You would have to make decisions about where your kayak went
Right.
and actually like drive that experience.
Yeah.
Whereas just watching the movie, you're
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 not
not
an
engaged.
active participant. Yeah. Now, another thing that I just thought of is what if the person you're channeling into is not aware that you are channeling into them?
They often are not. I just like from my experience, from my talking to others, and also being kind of a psychic researcher. Often, the channeling body or brain is either unaware of the experience, as in when you leave, they're going to have kind of a memory gap,
Right.
or they are aware that they're having an experience, but they're not aware that someone else is driving.
Mm-hmm.
They don't quite know why they're acting a little different or talking a little different. I'd call it almost like co-piloting,
Yeah.
or they think they're co-piloting, but they're actually in the back seat.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, if you ever have a dream, and I mean you as in the audience as well, ever have a dream where you're just like you're in a car and it turns out you're actually in the back seat or the passenger seat, and suddenly you're trying to drive it, that is usually an analogy for this kind of
Right.
channeling. It also can mean that you're in a car. And your dream is trying to tell you that you're not the one driving the car.
Yeah, I've had this experience as a dreamer before where it's like, oh, I want to go do this thing, and the body goes in a completely different direction. And I'm like, well, I guess we're going this way now. And dream logic sort of accepts it, but upon waking, realizing that, oh, I was probably in someone else and they were a lot more in control and aware. Um, I will say, like, I'm not trying to toot my own horn or Felix's horn or anything, but like, channeler and channelee both being aware of each other is kind of rare.
Yeah.
It's and also like having this partnership. I mean, part of the reason why we're recording these episodes is to have this kind of chronicle of what we're doing. Like, there's been times where uh after listening to an episode, Felix can provide more feedback on things like, say, a stray thought comes across Mantis's mind that he didn't think to bring up at the time. Felix will catch it because it was in that brain, the body and brain that he normally occupies. Upon re listening to it, he'll catch it and be able to jot it down for like follow up. For me, like I have notes sometimes of like stuff to follow up on with different people. And that's sort of unique. Like the way we're talking about channeling, we've had to spend years getting to this place in order to help other people understand. That's sort of like Felix's and I's goal. And I know, like, you guys as well, like, you've signed up for this as well to help other people become more conscious of this and understand what's happening. But we've had to become very, very conscious and very, very deliberate.
Yeah, and it's been a real learning curve.
Definitely.
Like there's some real curveballs that life has thrown us in some ways that meant that we learned some things very fast, or just learned some things that usually people don't have to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like getting to. There's a couple things that you said. I'm trying to kind of think back through them. Um, this is where like I have a little trouble focusing
Yeah.
whenever I project into someone. Um, like keeping a memory of all that we've talked about and stuff is a little difficult for me.
Yeah. So I brought up the fact that, like, being more conscious of channeler and channelee, that, like, Felix reviewing podcasts and realizing things, like, for example, what Mantis has thought about, any of those ringing a bell? Or...
Well, before that, we were talking about just, like, if you're
channeling into someone who's not aware.
Yeah, if you're channeling into someone who's not aware. If you're just channeling into someone at all, like, what can you start with? What should you stick to?
Yes.
If you can take a moment and kind of, like, think in the brain that you're in, like, hey, what has this body been doing recently? What has this person been doing recently? What do they usually do? What's their norms? Because to give a very, very clear example, if you project into someone and that someone is in high school, specifically they are in a classroom,
yeah,
then can you do anything? Yes. Will you? Probably not. You will probably sit in that desk, unless you're the teacher, in which case you'll keep teaching the lesson, and you'll subscribe to certain social mores. You won't leave the classroom and steal a car.
Right.
Like, I just do not think that that's highly likely to be something that you would do. Most people will stick to the script, as it were. So even though you are projecting into someone and could technically do anything, you probably will stick to what's normal for that body and brain.
Another thing is that the body and brain will have an effect on you. I know that in my channeling, especially since I've had an injury so recently, there are times where if the person has not been in the body enough, the body itself will lock up and will not allow that person to move in order to prevent further injury to itself.
Yeah, there's been a few times where I've ended up in any body, really, and just kind of like felt like, nope, you're not getting up from the chair for whatever reason. I have projected into a few people who were in assistive devices such as wheelchairs, and learned quite a few very interesting norms for that lifestyle. There's actually a few things that I missed because they had a couple of really interesting attachments.
Yeah.
And like gaining that awareness of what it's like for them, what their norms are, what their life experience is, was very, like, deeply interesting.
Yeah, and something that is also pretty common is that the brain will supply, like, the baseline information, like what it thinks is normal. It will basically let you know that at like 3 o'clock school lets out and you get on this bus. And like if we're continuing the high school example, and like there is a bit of like connective tissue there where it's like doesn't it's not affected by whether or not the person who quote unquote owns the body is there or not. There's some norms that it will just go through automatically. And if you do query mentally about it, it will give that information.
There's actually a few tests and experiments that Felix has done with channeling entities where he's met somebody new who he hasn't channeled before and has channeled them to do a very routine task. The task was going to the bank and handing over some old coins and exchanging them for paper dollars.
Right.
And it's routine in that, like, no matter who goes up and does it, you're going to get the same result.
Right.
And for that entity, it was like their first time ever doing anything like this.
Oh, wow.
And so they got to the counter and were feeling a little nervous, and then just started kind of talking and chatting the way that it would be natural for the body to do so. And that's where, like, you know, the body's like, oh yeah, you're talking to a bank teller, just like, you know, kind of jokingly, you know, say, oh yeah, these old coins, like, you can't buy anything in the store with them, but like, the bank will take it.
Yeah.
The person actually had to ask their supervisor about it because they didn't recognize Eisenhower dollars.
Ah, yes. Those things look old enough that you think they're collectible, but they're not.
Yeah, they're worth about $1.
Yes. Especially unless they're like uncirculated, which the ones that we had were definitely circulated.
Yeah, mint uncirculated would be in like some kind of lucite block or something.
Right.
So like it was a routine task in that, like, you always get the same results. It was a little new to the teller that he was talking to, and when he found himself like socially a little bit like, oh, what do I do? The body took over.
Yeah.
Like to make chit chat. I've found that happening too as well. Like sometimes it's a little hard to figure out what to do what to do socially.
Yeah.
And often the body just has a memory. It's like, oh, here's how you talk to people.
Yeah.
And like let the body tell you things.
Right. All right. So, I think that was a lot of great information. Is there anything else that you want to bring up in closing? Like any last tips or something?
I'd like to bring up another thing about food.
Oh, yeah.
So one thing the body has a bit of trouble with is if someone who's channeling into it eats food and then immediately leaves.
Yes.
If you give it 5 minutes at least, maybe 10, to digest while you're in that body, it's a lot better, because if you leave and someone else comes up, or like the original owner of the body comes up, the body finds itself not understanding what happened to the food, and suddenly it's got foreign food in it that it's already digesting. That's how it feels for the body.
Right.
And also in your body that you're projecting from, suddenly you were digesting food and now you're not.
Yeah.
So when it comes to food, like Mantis and I were doing this with the deviled eggs, because I tasted a deviled egg. I did this. It's my fault. I hadn't had deviled eggs before. I had read of their legend, and it was very romantic. Like, I can finally have a deviled egg. Now I'm tasting a deviled egg. It doesn't taste like what I expected it to taste like. And it didn't taste to me, like the deviled egg did not taste to me like it tastes to Felix, like it tastes to the body.
Right.
And so I was like, that's so weird. It doesn't taste like, hey, Mantis, come down here and see what the deviled eggs taste like. And so I had Mantis come down.
A quick switch.
Just for like a minute.
Yes, he wasn't even finished chewing.
He wasn't even finished chewing when I booted him out. And I was like, grab the deviled egg and see if it tastes different to you. And then go. Get out of here.
The body was very confused.
So I had consumed a deviled egg and then left. And then Mantis came in and consumed a deviled egg and then left. And so the body was like, well... Because I came back in after Mantis,
right.
And I could feel the body being like, I kind of have a lead brick in my stomach. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to do a flavor experiment, and I forgot that I included your stomach in that experiment.
Right.
If you're doing any kind of taste flavor type experiments, like, I know it might sound gross, but consider like biting it, chewing it, and then spitting it out. Yeah. Kind of like wine tasting. They could taste like 5 or 10 different wines because they're spitting out most of it.
You're supposed to?
Yeah, you are supposed to. And like if you want to try flavor experiments, just remember like the body keeps the score is something that we'll probably talk about a lot. Yeah. And the score it's keeping is you've had so much food and you're not even sticking around to digest it. What the fuck is wrong with you?
So yes, be careful about eating. Very good point.
On smoking and drug consumption, whatever it is that you consume will come over to your projecting body in some way. And whatever it is that you consume will also affect who it is that you're in. So, like, if they regularly smoke herbals or drink tea or have coffee, whatever, take note of what's normal for them. You will probably enjoy it while you're in that body.
But be aware that if you do ingest a lot of caffeine while you're in there, you are going to feel a bit more energetic or like buzzy.
Yeah, you'll
Some
get
people,
caffeine.
yeah, you'll get the knock on effects of caffeine into your projecting body.
Yeah, and so like if you're in a new body that you've just channeled into, that you're projecting and you're channeling into that body, and you're like, man, I could really use a cigarette. You need to check to see if that body is a smoker first.
Yes.
Also, with the cost of cigarettes these days,
Oh my god.
you need to be polite about that. Don't consume stuff that is hard to replace. Keep aware of people's economic situations, especially nowadays. It's different than it used to be.
Yeah.
Even it's different than it used to be even 3 months ago. I'm aware of inflation on Earth now.
Yeah.
Something I didn't have to keep track of before.
Yeah, because there's been a few requests for like certain things, and like it's like, well, our economic situation means that we can't easily go out and get that. Like that's, or even just like our household situation, because like with my injury, I'm not really able to drive. So there's stuff that's like we used to be able to get like even a few months ago more regularly that we can't get now because like the yeah, it's 10 minutes away by drive, but it's in an area that's very hard to walk to.
Yeah, like I've been in a few people who are in wheelchairs, and
Yeah.
you get to go where the ramp is.
Yep.
You don't get to go up the stairs anymore,
Yep.
no matter how much you want to.
Yep.
So yeah, just keeping in mind what situation people are in, and if you want to come back,
Mm-hmm.
like if you trash that body, it will probably keep you out next time.
Right.
And if you trash, whatever else is going on in their lives, like there's a good chance that you're not going to be able to get back in. If you want to come back, like you've got to make a good impression, and
Yes.
you've got to be responsible.
And be respectful.
Yes.
Don't make any major decisions while you're in there. Um, anything can wait for a day. Literally anything can wait for a day. If someone's trying to make you make a big decision and you're not in your own body, you're in someone else's body, just say, hey, I need some time to think about it.
Yeah, definitely. Everything seems very immediate.
Mm-hmm.
One thing, and this applies to right now, I've noticed that pretty much everyone who channels into another body wants to stay forever.
Yes.
You will want to stay there way longer than you can.
Mm-hmm.
I can't actually stay for past a certain point of time. I get fatigue and I have to go back to where I'm from.
Right.
And so you can feel kind of like a angst of like, no, I want to stay around, and like, what if I can't come back? I miss this place, and like just those kinds of thoughts are from a part of your brain that doesn't really understand time,
Mm-hmm.
and just reminding yourself like, I can come back. Like I have a life where I'm from.
Right.
This isn't my body, and somebody else needs to come back and do things.
Right.
Just remembering time
Yeah.
is really important. And when you do drag things out for longer than you should, you will feel it on both ends.
You will feel the effects. The body will have a fatigue as well, and the person who's coming back will feel kind of bleh, even if they don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
And this comes back to the, be respectful. If you want to be able to come back, you don't want to leave it in a bad state. So even though you may feel like a sense of like, oh, but I want to hold on for just a little bit longer, it's just like anything else. If you do that, you're gonna just drain yourself, and then it makes it harder the next time.
Yeah. And if you do make a mistake, you can try to apologize. If they're not very conscious of you, but you end up in there again, you end up in them again, then if you can't consciously apologize to them, can't leave a sorry note or something, try to do something nice for them.
Mm-hmm.
Try to make it better. It doesn't take too much.
No.
Just try to leave it either the same or better than you found it.
Sounds good. That's a good rule for like a lot of things in life. Leave it as good or better than you found it.
I'm actually going to take that as my note to leave.
All right. Well, thank you again, Umbra, for coming in onto our show, and hopefully we'll have you back in the future.
Yes, definitely, hopefully, because I want to be back here.
Yay!
Bye. Goodbye.
Goodbye. And Felix is doing his... That was a very smooth transition. I'm just noting that for the podcast. Like, that was a very, very nice handoff.
Yeah. There's been a few times where guests, like, as you're, like, trying to wrap it up, there's been a few who've been like, oh man, I want to be here longer.
I want to say something more, and then they end up taking like another 25 minutes, and then you come back and you're like, ugh. But
and yeah,
this one looks like it was a nice handoff. Umbra's always, I feel like, one of the more conscientious ones. She actually brought up this topic, so she's often thinking about this stuff.
Yeah, she really wanted people who are experiencing this, like, actually channeling into.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted them to have something.
Yeah.
To go by, and I do too. Like, I don't get as much awareness of channeling into somewhere else.
Right.
But at some point, I'm gonna gain it, and, like, I'll know more because she was in here.
Definitely. So, love that. Really glad that Umbra was able to come over, and I'm sure she'll be back. She's always very, very fun to talk to. So, as someone who has talked to her very often.
Yeah. I'm gonna give a few notes.
Yeah.
I haven't settled in yet, so I'm gonna change my mind. Could you talk a little bit while I sort of ground and stuff?
Sure. I'll probably just give some. So we are. I know we keep mentioning it about the Etsy. We're still sort of debating the. We had episode 6 or 7 where we discovered that we still have a lot of methane in a lot of our boxes, and unfortunately a lot of our books, which was some of the stuff that we were really focusing on selling. And we right now don't feel comfortable selling things from our house because we don't want anyone else to get methane exposure, no matter how small. It's too much. So we are still on vacation on the Etsy Bad Occult Apothecary. We're going to be pivoting to digital items for now. We've got some very fun stuff that we're thinking about. Felix is going to be making zine type things that you can print out yourself for like how-tos with assistance from input from people like Mantis and Rob when it comes to how to set up your own ferment. Basics on wild harvesting, how to do that sustainably, some other things as well. We're also part of our airing out is actually having to open books, and some of the books that we have are actually out of copyright, so we're going to be scanning those and offering them as PDF downloads. And like Felix as an artist often has sketches and stuff that turn into just black and white inks that we can offer as coloring pages. Things like that are going to be available hopefully in time for December. So even if you can't order something physically for someone, whether it be because of timing, shipping, I've heard that Canada, like the whole postal service, is shut down due to a strike right now. So
Oh, wow.
yes.
Huh.
That's another issue as well. Like, I was looking into shipping, and then I found out about the strike, and it's like, oh dear.
Good time to go digital.
Yes, so we'll be able to offer digital items hopefully in time for Christmas shopping, so you guys can get some stuff for yourselves or for other people. And we'll have that on Bad Occult Apothecary on Etsy here. Hopefully before the end of the month. I'm not making any promises because it's a complicated collaborative effort.
One of the things that we were planning to do was use all these boxes we have as shipping boxes.
Right.
But they're not shippable. The cardboard itself is infused with methane. So we have to get new boxes before we can ship things. And apparently we can't ship anything to Canada anyway. So, yeah.
Yes, so it's going to be, we're pivoting our focus to digital only right now, which means we've got to revamp the revamp. And so, just keep an eye on that. Go ahead and favorite the shop, like the shop, if you want to be notified when we finally come out of vacation mode. So, how are you feeling, Felix?
A little tired. I could tell that Umbra was getting a little tired towards the end.
Yeah.
She was trying to be conscientious of not stretching it out too far.
But she had a lot to say, which was really great.
Yeah, and I really appreciate what she shared. Like, I've got sort of the outline of it. I'm gonna enjoy listening through this one.
So, yeah. Any other notes from your end?
Oh, I wanted to share with the audience that you may have noticed that Umbra's portrait is the only one so far that is not facing the camera full on.
Yes.
That she actually chose to do an angle. And totally breaking my streak of producing art that could also double as a mugshot.
You've been joking about this so many times. I don't know if we've mentioned it on the podcast yet, but you, like, every single time you made a drawing, you're like, yep, doubles as a mugshot.
Got their mugshot. And it's like, Umbra refused to be arrested.
She is a law-abiding citizen. She does not want to even think about the possibility of having a mugshot. How dare you? So, yeah. Any other notes on the topic of that?
Go to my Tumblr and guess who did what art.
Ooh, yes. His Tumblr is Felix DeWriter, DAWRITER @tumblr.com. In addition, badoccultadvice.tumblr.com. Feel free to send us messages on there if you'd like. If the workings of Tumblr are too arcane for you, we also have badoccultadvice@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out to us on either of those if you have, any comments on any of the episodes that you've had, any questions for any of the people that have been channeled, questions for Felix and I, really good ramen recipes, or any of your experiences making your own hooch or fermenting your own cider or anything like that, feel free to share.
Tell us what you've been doing.
Tell us what you've been doing. Tell us of your experiments. We are also still working on the RSS feed. So technically we are on Spotify. We are on Apple Podcasts. We are on Substack. I don't know how much has gotten done with the RSS. I haven't heard anything, so I'm assuming...
it's just episode 1.
It's still just episode 1.
You can find episode 1, and then after that, please just go to YouTube.
YouTube has the audio-visual backups, which includes the art... and shows, basically the visualizer where when Felix channels someone else, we do have those pictures up as well. We also have the Twitch VODs, which stay for 30 or 60 days. I don't really keep track. But all of our audio-visual backups are on YouTube. All right. Anything else you want to plug?
Nothing that I want to plug. I just want to mention that, if you're currently channeling into another body right now, hey, what's up? Good job.
Good job. Thank you for listening to the episode of How to Be a Better, more polite entity that is channeling into another body. Thank you for listening. And thank you to everyone who has listened to this podcast. Again, this is Bad Occult Podcast, where we have been talking about inadvisable things to do in the name of magical science. As always, I've been Tyler Cadmian, aka Shadow.
And I have sometimes been Felix S. Warren.
And we will see you again in the next episode. Bye.